Hey guys, my name's Camille, welcome back to another video on the channel. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a podcast, and I haven't done one of these for myself, even though I've filmed podcasts for my clients, I've edited podcasts for my clients, and I've even created short form content from those podcasts for TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook purposes. I've got to say, podcasts are absolutely amazing, mainly because you can kind of just sit back and relax and kind of just talk with your audience and answer specific questions that may have, I don't know, you've been asked in the past, or you just want to get a point across within a specific topic. So today, this might be a one-off podcast for me because I've never really done one for my brand, and I'm not sure if it's going to work, if it's a thing that I want to continue. But I thought I would trial it and answer some of the questions that's been asked over and over again. And I think it just might be a little bit easier to answer this in one video. And if anyone asks me questions within or along the lines of what I'm going to be answering in today's video, I think I'll just send them a link to this and they can just listen to it before going to bed or on their long drive to work, etc. So in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about my career. What I do for a living, how did I get there, and where did I come from? Because what I do is absolutely amazing and I absolutely love it, and I'm extremely grateful for everything that I do and all the opportunities and the individuals and the people I get to meet along the way whilst doing what I absolutely love. So I'm a commercial filmmaker, I'm a content creator, photographer, videographer. In general, I just create content and I get paid for it. That's my job and I absolutely love it, and it's like a dream job nowadays. Everyone wants to be a content creator of some sort, everyone wants to be a videographer, photographer. I see all these posts on the internet where people are looking for photographers, and there's thousands of comments under those posts. Let's say like wedding photographers, etc. And I did not know this environment, and like the environment of like the creative environment is so saturated in the way where there's so many people doing it, and there's so many people that just want to do it as well. In addition to me being a commercial filmmaker, photographer, videographer, etc., I'm also a teacher. So I teach film and TV privately every once in a while, and I have some amazing students. A big shout out to you guys, because like you guys like are generally like really driven to create content, and you create some, or you come up with some amazing ideas, and you definitely execute them really, really well. And I'm generally really proud of you guys. But what we're gonna do is dive into answering these questions of who I am, which is a commercial filmmaker, photographer, creator, how I got there, and where did I come from, and how did it all kind of spiral for me to be where I am. So in order to answer this question, we're going to dive into a little bit of my personal life, just a tiny bit, when I'm going to be revealing all of my personal life. But we're going to go back maybe a decade and a half ago, something like that, when I was about 7-8 years old. So I originally come from Poland, and I moved over to UK when I was about 7-8 years old. And I've got to say, it was a big one, because when you're moving from one country to another, even though you've learned a language in one country, so let's say, I'm Polish, I've learned Polish, but I also learned English as my secondary language in school, because I ended up going to school in Poland already by that age. I did a few classes. The English that I learned in school did not apply to like the street English or the English that, let's say, the children would speak in school. So yeah, I could go to a restaurant and have, let's say, I don't know, order food or, you know, communicate on the basic level, but there was still that language barrier, especially like the young kids. You know, I was a young kid trying to sort of vibe with all the other young kids. It's difficult because, like, let's say, for example, I don't know, in England, when you're learning French, the French that you learn is very academic. And then when you go to France and you try speaking French, people are like, yeah, you are not from France. There will be that language barrier, and it will kind of create some difficulties in certain scenarios. That's what really happened to me at the time, which made me never have like a one friend group that I stuck to. You know, a lot of times when you go to school, you have like that one friend group. You're like the cool kids and nerdy kids and maybe like the geeks. And I'm going to be categorizing people from like nerdy, geeks, and cool kids. Please don't get offended if you're one of those groups. It's just an easier way for me to categorize different groups for the sake of today's video and podcast. So I was kind of jumping in between different groups. So I vibed with the cool kids because I absolutely loved sports at the time. Where I came from, we didn't have a lot of like technology. I mean, it was the early 2000s, so no one really had a lot of technology. We grew up by going out and playing sports, climbing trees, etc., which was, I think, the best type of childhood you can ever have. Nowadays, like, kids are just on TikTok or playing video games, which I did have my fair share of video game playing, but I'll kind of explore that later on. So I was jumping in between those different friend groups. I was with the cool kids playing football, and then I was also with the nerdy kids. At the time, the big thing with the nerdy and like the geek kids. I'm going to kind of categorize them as one. It's like the nerdy kids. The big thing with them was Pokemon cards, Bakugan cards. It was like little balls that you like throw at like a card, and it's like a magnetic card, and it opened up like a little dragon. I had no clue what those were, but I was like, this is really cool, so I might just join in and see what this is all about. And that's how I kind of made friends. I was just bouncing around depending on what I felt and how I felt, which was awesome. And also because I came from like a different environment, I had a lot to kind of give out as well, or bring to those friend groups, because I was a little bit different. My opinions were a little bit different, my sense of humor was a little bit different. But as I kind of got older, got into secondary school, I was still kind of friends with some of the cool kids, etc. Still bouncing around the different friend groups, but I kind of prioritized like the nerdy side of things. And I think it was because of my like personal needs and what I was kind of learning from them and the values they were bringing, because there were some things that the cool kids did which I kind of joined in, but then I thought, you know what, this is not the right thing to do. And what I'm talking about is things like going behind the school shed and smoking cigarettes. The cool group that do all like the cool stuff, but in reality those are the bad things to do, and they don't help you develop as an individual. And I had that need to develop to sort of like not fit with people, but understand the culture that I kind of moved into, because I had to adapt. There was a lot of adapting, and that's the reason I kind of pulled away from the cool kids. And there was actually a saying I saw on TikTok once, and on YouTube or somewhere online, where you are who you hang around with, or show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And I guess that's kind of a real thing, because I started hanging around with like the nerdy kids, and I became more knowledgeable in certain areas, like for example computing and IT. That's really sparked my interest at the time, especially for the fact that I personally, like in my household, we didn't have a lot of money. There was not much of money coming in. We just basically had enough money to survive, and I had this really old laptop, and at the time there was like some video games that some of the kids were playing. Early stage of secondary school, like year 7, etc. At that time I think Club Penguin and like all those like flash games were a thing, and that kind of worked on the computer, even though that old laptop hardly ran Microsoft Word. Like it would crash if you wrote too many words in Microsoft Word, but for some reason the flash games worked. I think it's because they were web-based, and it just worked. But as time went on, there were more things that you could do on the computers in the sense of playing other games, etc. And that kind of really sparked my interest. And because I wanted to play those games, and my computer was really slow, I had to find ways to make my computer better. So I started researching, building little computers from maybe like scavenge parts. Sometimes I would like get some broken computers where people were just giving them away, getting RAM sticks from that, sticking it into my computer, seeing if that works. Sometimes I broke things, then I built things, and it was like a trial and error thing. And being friends with those like nerdy groups, I could kind of get a lot of information from them, because they kind of had those things that actually worked, and I could see what I was kind of aiming at when it came to my goals and sort of like building those computers. And as time went on, I eventually my mum eventually kind of like saved up a little bit of cash, and as a Christmas present got me a PlayStation 3, just because I really wanted a console and I didn't really have one. I mean, I did have like a PSP, which I had for years. It was awesome. It was one of the greatest gifts that I did get when I was really, really young. But as a kid, you kind of want things that other people have. So a few years after the PlayStation 3 came out, my mum actually ended up getting it for me, and a few of the games that some of my friends were playing. And eventually, at the beginning we had a really bad internet connection, and that internet connection was horrible, so I couldn't play online. So from the time of getting the PlayStation 3, even though it was a few years old, I had to probably wait, or didn't have to wait, but it probably took us about a year to kind of get like a stable enough internet connection so I can play those games online. So I was kind of late at joining them, but eventually I started playing those games, and I absolutely loved it at the time. It was great, but I felt like there was something missing. And even though I enjoyed those games, I played those games with my friends, I also saw the tutorials on YouTube. I saw those tutorials because I wanted to learn how to do specific things in those games. And then I saw my friends were recording different clips and posting them on YouTube. And I really wanted to kind of join that club. And it was within that sort of like geeky, nerdy group. And I really wanted to join that club. And I did. What I eventually did, I found like this old camcorder that we had at home, stacked loads of books, because I couldn't really have like a capture card. It used to be like a little box that you used to like feed the cables from the console into a box, and then you have like a splitter where one side will go to your monitor or TV if you had, depending which one you had, and then the other set of cables would go like into a computer which would capture the content for you. But because I didn't have the money to do that, I ended up stacking loads of boxes, putting the camcorder on the boxes and kind of facing it towards a TV. And I've got to say, it was a genius idea at the time. Eventually from the camcorder, I've upgraded to like an old phone that I found laying around. It was a genius idea because it kind of allowed me to do and be creative. But one thing that it did do, it gave me a lot of hate because for some reason, so let me explain why it gave me a lot of hate. I was creating videos rather than clips. I was creating narrative style videos, and I found a lot of comfort with narrative style videos and just creating stories whilst using the video games as tools in order to create those stories. For example, like the Minecraft videos that I did. And yes, I did Minecraft videos. You could probably search up my old channels. I'll link them in the description of this podcast and any of the other bits that I mentioned throughout the podcast as well. Because of those narrative videos, it wasn't really a thing at the time. Like a few people were making narrative videos. You saw these YouTubers here and there, and I had no clue how to make narrative videos. So I was really making a clown out of myself. But at the same time, it was something that gave me joy because I could like control the narrative, etc. Completely different from my life because I can control my life. It kind of gave me like this little world of, hey, I have control over this world. I can make little stories. This is awesome. And then the word got out that I was making those little stories on the internet whilst using the video games. And some people were pretty cool with it. Creating content online was something weird, you know? So there was like the handful of people that were okay with it. Majority of people were like, hey dude, why do you talk to a camera, you know, why are you talking to your phone whilst playing a video game? Why can't you just play a video game like a normal person? So that was the kind of environment I had for that for a few years. And eventually I kind of developed my content in a sense of I moved away from the gaming stuff. I got myself a little camera. I got to an age, I think I was like 15 or something, or somewhere around there. I was about 15, 16 years old when I went to college. It's a bit weird because the UK education system is not like the US or anywhere else, where you go to like your primary school, then you'll end up going to secondary school, and rather than going to, or secondary school is like high school, but rather than going from high school / secondary school to university, you go to college, which is like the equivalent of sixth form. And then from there, once you get your A-levels in sixth form in college, you end up, or you have the option to go to university if you got good enough grades, and then you need to get a loan or pay for university. But I'll get to that in later on. I thought I'd just explain that just in case I have some viewers outside from the UK. I was around 15, 16 years old. I was going into college and I got this job. I was a cleaner, just cleaning toilets, bathrooms, offices. Absolutely horrendous job. I've got to tell you, if you're a kid and you manage to get yourself a part-time job and it's horrendous, it's a good thing because it teaches you for the future. Like if you do the hard things at a younger age, everything else later down in life becomes easier, especially as you progress and become more successful. Because let's say, for example, you're successful straight away and you do all these amazing things. That's awesome. That's great. I root for you. But let's say, for example, if you do have a big failure, something happens and, you know, your life takes a down spiral, which sometimes happens. You lose everything. And imagine if you don't go through that hard time, you lose everything, but you always had everything. Then you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to start now? Whereas having that cleaning job actually allowed me to sort of kind of develop certain values of, hey, you know what? Even though this is like a tough job, like it's not the prettiest job ever, you know, I'm cleaning things and offices, etc. And I was only doing that for a few years, but it kind of taught me certain morals that allow me to sort of develop and succeed within the area that I was trying to establish myself in. But as I got that job, I ended up kind of saving a little bit of money, kind of giving a little bit of money towards like the house side of things, you know, giving a little bit of money towards the bills, but also kind of saving up money for my own equipment. And it was the era of everyone wanting to build a gaming PC. I had a few friends that built their own gaming PC, and I really wanted to experiment now because I had this, even though I had the PlayStation 3, I didn't have enough money to sort of buy a new laptop, etc. And I kind of wanted a nicer computer because everyone's getting into gaming on a PC, and like the specs were much better, and it was a better value for money at the time. And I guess it's still a better value now because you can get so much more for what you get in return when you build your own computer, or if you just in general have a gaming PC. It basically lasts you forever. So I started doing all my research whilst working and going to school in order to build my first gaming PC. And I was really into computing and IT. This is where I was kind of the mass of computing and IT. And creating the content side of things was just a hobby of mine. I never really considered this as a career. So I saved up some money on my computer. It was about £1,000. My mum helped me a little bit at the time as well. And then one of my friends, we used to call him Caveman, absolutely amazing guy. If you probably go to some of the old YouTube channels that I have, I'm going to link them in the description below if you want to go and scout through all my content, like the old content, because it's still out there. Some of the ones that I've unlisted or privatized have made them public as well. So if you want to go and see like the videos I made with a phone that was pointing at a screen and things like that. But Caveman showed me a lot because he helped me build my first ever computer. So once I saved up my money, I was like, hey, Caveman, I've saved up money, but I still have no clue how to build a computer. Like, I've been doing this research. I've got a basic idea, but I'm so lost. So he was like, okay, so how much money you got? I gave him sort of the budget that I'm working with. And then he said, do you have a monitor, keyboard, etc.? And I was like, no. So everything was kind of included, the mouse, the monitor, the keyboard, and the computer itself and the parts for the computer. So we ended up ordering everything. Once it arrived, he showed me how to put it together, and it was like Lego, but a very expensive Lego and very, very scary Lego. I must say, it was very scary at the time because it was my basically life savings that I've just put into parts that I had no clue are going to work. We built the computer, we fired it up, and that's when my life changed when it came to content creation. I started creating videos or like gaming style videos on the computer. At the beginning, I was really bad because I had no clue what I was doing. Also, the specs of the computer, even though they were really, really good, they weren't the top of the range specs, meaning that I still had some limitations I was working with, and I did not have the knowledge on how to sort of like go past them. So there was that barrier to it. So once again, I was doing all my research. And research is key because the more you research, and also the younger you start at doing whatever you do, the more knowledge you acquire. So like with me creating content, probably the reason I do it now is because I started so early on, so I could come across all those barriers that were there to come across, and all the failures that I came across, to learn from those failures and just keep on pushing forward. So I had a little bit more time to succeed, and those little successes compounded to where I am right now. And hopefully the new successes that are compounding now as we speak will help me towards the future successes and goals that I have planned for myself and for my career. So I was creating all this content. I was creating it throughout the college time, so the 2 years. So 15, so like the 16 all the way up to 18, whilst doing computing and IT, and going into like content creation was still like a hobby. It was just something that I was doing on the side. I've also decided at that age to experiment with other types of videos, so like talking to the camera, for example, or creating little cinematic sequences. I ended up getting like a small old like DSLR camera. It was really, really cheap. I had this kit lens with it, and I got very excited thinking I'm going to create all these masterpieces, not realizing that you need a little bit more than a camera to create amazing videos. But I was doing something. It was a Canon 700D, I remember. It wasn't the best on the autofocus. I was always out of focus, and low light capabilities compared to the equipment I have right now were absolutely horrible, and the content I was creating wasn't the best, but apparently it was good enough for others locally to, I guess, recognize, because I ended up getting offers of creating content for others. So I had individuals come up to me saying, hey, I've seen some of your images. Would you mind capturing this event for me? I've seen some of your images here. Would you mind capturing his birthday? Would you mind taking photos of this wedding? And yes, I was doing all that on the really, really old and bad DSLR camera, which the results weren't the best, but I weren't really paid for this stuff. Like, I was making all this content for free. Maybe occasionally, once I kind of upgraded, eventually in that, like, closer to, let's say I was more closer to like 17 and a half, I got another camera from the money I was kind of saving, and that camera allowed me to create a little bit better content and kind of adding a little bit of equipment to my kit, which eventually that hobby of mine turned into a little bit of a side hustle. So I was making money from that side hustle, but it wasn't a lot because I was used a lot of the time. There was even like a records label that reached out to me, and I've got to say, at the time I was really excited because I was like, oh, awesome, records label, like you guys must have like some famous singers. And as you know, as a kid, as a, you know, someone in their late teens, I just generally just got excited and very, very happy, not realizing that this is like a starter records label. Basically, someone's created a records label and started scouting out for beginner musicians just to make a little bit of money off of them. That's all it was. And they were kind of making money off of me because I was creating edits for them from the content they shot, but I was just creating edits, and those edits I probably could have charged like easily £500, £800, maybe somewhere around that range. But they were like, hey, I'll pay you 50 quid for this video, I'll pay you 50 quid for that particular edit. And I personally was happy, not knowing that I was being basically used for the skills that I've already acquired from the years of creating content, which were my editing skills, because those were my strongest skills at the time. They were really, really good. My shooting and filming skills weren't, but eventually they did develop. So I was doing all these little jobs all the way until I was about 18 and a half, so about a year kind of from when I kind of started, or 2-3 years kind of when I started doing all these jobs, because I kind of started doing these jobs when I was about 16, 17, and then 18 and a half, 19 was the time when I was continuing doing them and doing them more, like all these jobs on a more consistent basis. I guess it was more of like a word of mouth thing, because I didn't have a website. I did have a little bit of social media presence. I was posting my videos on social media and sharing them, but majority of it was word of mouth. I created a piece of content for someone, and then someone, like one of their friends or someone who was following that particular individual, were like, hey, who created that, etc., etc. And then it was kind of like a tiny bit of a snowball effect. So I was about 18 while still in college, or sort of like finishing college. I decided to go to university, and the reason I went to university was because my family, their kind of belief was that if you go to university you have more of a better chance of succeeding in life, which is absolutely kind of garbage and true in some sense. So if you're going to university and you're doing like a specialist thing, let's say for example you want to become a doctor, a lawyer, etc., go for university. But I'll explain why in a minute. So I chose a few paths. I was still really into computing and IT, but I was kind of losing interest in that because I found the industry extremely boring. Mainly because I don't know, maybe because I've already been doing this for so long that I found it very boring, and I really only enjoyed it because it was helping me with the content creation side. Because every time I was learning something new for computing and IT, it was because of the content creation side of things. So I chose, I think it was like 5 or 4 choices that you could do. So all of my choices were computing and IT, besides one of the choices. So one of the choices was a university which was local to where I lived, and the reason for that is because it had a degree that was called film, radio and television, so I could kind of explore everything. And the way they advertised it was brilliant, that I would get to create my own films, which I did get to create my own short films, little adverts, etc. And the equipment, that's one thing that really sold me, because I really wanted to learn the specialist equipment, the cinema cameras, etc., which I eventually got accepted to that with, at first, a conditional offer, but then eventually I went through clearing and it was an unconditional offer, and I just went straight into it because I had some issues with college at that time of my life when I was in college, like 15 years old, whilst working, whilst going to college / school, whilst creating content. I basically had like a little family accident where I became a carer, basically a full-time carer, and that really plummeted my grades. There was a lot going on at that time. But eventually I got accepted to university. I went in for my first lesson, or the lecture, and we had a task to write an essay, and I believe it was something to do with film continuity. So not even knowing what it meant, I wrote like this whole essay about, there was 2 films that I included. It was a Fast and Furious series. So I wrote about Fast and Furious and 21 Jump Street. Those are the 2 films I wrote about. And to my knowledge, I failed. I failed the essay. It was horrible. I had no clue. Like at the time, I didn't even know what digesting, non-digesting sound meant. And like I was really disappointed because I was creating all this content. I could create the content, but I did not know the theory. And it absolutely blew me away in the sense of, do I really need this in the industry? As that's the time where I made my mind up that I want to go into the creative industry, and then realizing I don't know the theory really kind of bogged my confidence. But I continued creating content. I started studying, I started reading loads of books, and eventually I started passing all these essays. And throughout that first year, we're learning all this kind of amazing equipment, like how to use cinema cameras, how to edit in specific editing software, which I personally never edited, because at the time I was using Sony Vegas and Camtasia Studio and sort of dipping myself into Premiere Pro. But the standard in the industry at the time was Avid Media Composer, which is what we're learning at university. So I dipped and dabbled in some of these classes, and about half a year has gone by, and I've realized that we're able to rent out equipment for our own personal use, just for study purposes, creating our own little projects. And because I had these little client jobs building up over and over again, month by month, week by week, I needed better equipment. And there is this thing about universities where and banks as well. And the reason I'm mentioning banks, there's a really good reason for that. You know how if you want to start your own business, you go to a bank, you say, hey, I've got this amazing business idea. And you're like, hey, can I have 60 grand to start my own business? You give them your business plan, and I say, no, we don't want to give you 60 grand because it's a business plan, it's too risky. But if you decide to go to university, even if you decide to go to university and go out partying, drinking, and not even succeeding in life, because majority of people who go to university do the essay writing thing, but they don't actually go into the specialist modules and end up getting, your typical minimum wage job, which minimum wage jobs are not bad. I've worked a minimum wage job in the past and I absolutely loved it because it helped me to get to where I am. So I'm really grateful for everything that I have and everything that I've gone through. And if worse comes to worse, I wouldn't mind going back and starting all over again. I'll probably take the same steps and maybe avoid some of the failures with the knowledge that I currently have, which I have come across. But the banks will not give you a loan for a business, but they will give you a loan for university. And I had to get a loan because obviously my household was not rich enough to pay for my university studies. So I got a loan, and it was like a 50 grand loan. And now with all the increases with the interest rates, etc., it's probably around 60 grand, which is absolutely crazy. But I thought, you know what? If the bank wouldn't give me a loan for a business idea, why not use the loan that I had for my university, which I gave to my university to be accepted to uni, which at the time I didn't have the mindset of that. If you're paying a university and they still have the option of failing you and not giving you a degree, if even though you're paying for it, it's like you're paying for it. If I had this money and to start a business or even to buy a house, at the time, that I probably could have even bought a house at the time. So I paid for all that money for university, and because the availability as a film student to being able to rent out all this equipment, I started. Well, originally you couldn't actually rent it out just like that because you wanted it. You had to have specific training from specific lecturers for specific equipment, and you had to go get these little pieces of paper signed off. So I started polishing up my skills of, I guess they were sales skills. I'd call it the sweet talking skills because this is what everyone kind of said that I had, that I could sweet talk any lecturer to sign off any pieces of equipment at the time. And I've got to say, because of that skill that I had, everyone really wanted to be in the team with me whenever we were doing group projects, practical projects, because I could get any pieces of equipment I personally wanted. So once I kind of developed that skill, and I kind of rushed into developing that skill, it was probably the best skill ever. And I've got to say, developing specific skills in your life will get you, the earlier you develop them, the better. And if you can develop sales, talking to people and people skills, that will get you to anywhere you basically want without having to have money. You just got to have amazing charm, and I guess I have a little bit of that charm. But putting the charm to the side, I ended up using my sweet talking skills to rent out equipment on a weekly basis, and I started using that for my client work. And at the very beginning, I was like, hey, I'm making more money, I can do better project, which was awesome because I could charge more money. I was making a really good income. I was working part-time. At the time, I was working as a bartender / a server at a restaurant within a hotel, which eventually I kind of moved around different job roles, and I became a hotel manager at the end for a very, very short time, but I'll get to that in a minute. And I was renting all that equipment because I thought, hey, if I'm paying all this money, I want to get my money's worth and get everything that I possibly can from university if I can't start a business, because the bank would not give me money to get a loan for a business. And then at the beginning, all of that money, I kind of got influenced to go out a lot. I went out, I kind of got into the wrong group of friends where we used to go out drinking, even smoking a little bit of pot here and there. And I've realized that I was just burning through my money. I was inflating my life, which was not very good, and I was hanging around with the wrong people. And I've got to say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. That phrase is absolutely true. Eventually, I kind of started distancing myself away from these so-called friends, I have no clue what they're doing now. Maybe they're even watching my podcast. If you have succeeded and you're doing well, congrats to you, buddy, and I would really love to hear from you. And if you haven't succeeded, or maybe you're not where you are, but you do want to be where, like, in a specific place, do reach out to me, because you guys have been amazing, and I still consider you guys as my friends. But I moved away from these individuals just because I wanted to focus on my goals. So I carried on doing what I was doing, going to university, having my part-time job at the hotel in the restaurant / pub bar area. And I was also making the money from my client jobs, and the money I was making from my client jobs, I was reinvested into my equipment. And over the 2-3 years that I was at uni, because I knew that I'm not gonna have that luxury of renting the equipment that I'm using from university for my client job. So all that money that I reinvested, I ended up putting towards gear to replace the gear that I was borrowing from university. So I became self-sufficient, so I can do all these jobs without needing to borrow or ask or even rent in the future, because renting equipment is very expensive. And I've got to a point where I had all the equipment needed for jobs, so I can charge slightly lower rates but still make very good money. And from there, it was just a constant upward spiral, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So I was just working. There was a little bit of results, sometimes there was no results, and then I was working. Sometimes there was no results once again, working, and then all of a sudden, boom, I got paid, and then it just constantly kept on going up. And that's how I evolved into where I am right now, but not just yet. Just because there was a few more steps that I did as I got a little bit comfortable. And being comfortable is really, really bad in the sense, there's nothing wrong with being comfortable, but if you have specific goals and you haven't reached them yet, it's not good into just like getting comfortable. And what I mean by that, around in like 2019, I want to say, 2019, 2020, I became the hotel manager. And I was making above minimum wage money, and I was just being like a duty manager. I wasn't like the overall head of the hotel. There were like managers above me. I think there was like 2 or 3 people above me. One of them, which I've never actually met in person, because they were just like the regional manager, and one of them were like the operations manager, and then maybe there was just 2. I can't remember. Yeah, 2 or 3, something along these lines. I think I've only met one of them because they were constantly coming onto site, and he was pretty great because he taught me some of the skills on how to run a business. I actually learned a lot whilst being a manager, and also sometimes working nights at a hotel, like finances and a little bit of accounting, because I had to do that as well as a manager, like filing in money, doing all the money stuff from the whole day, because we had like some cash money, some banking that had to be done. So working at a hotel in a normal job, even being like the manager, was amazing, but it made me very comfortable. And the reason it made me comfortable was because the money that I was making was enough money to sustain myself, to pay my bills, to help my family. And I kind of started going away from the goals that I was trying to achieve. Also, the hotel work was taking up majority of my time, and I was doing less and less of the things that I said that I would do. So after working maybe about 8 months at the hotel as a manager, I ended up, actually what happened was that hit, and the whole lockdown came, and it was just before I was about to quit, which luckily I didn't quit, because I would be left with zero money, because there was this scheme in the UK where if you were employed, whatever you were employed at, you would get that amount of money, even though you were sitting at home, because it was lockdown, no one could go out, and it was a prison. And it's weird because there was a lockdown, there was you're basically like in a prison, and now we still have and we're free, we're roaming around. Some people are vaccinated, some people are not, so a bit fishy right there. But anyways, pretty weird pandemic that we had there, because things were happening and people were basically prisoned in their own homes, and now we're all allowed to roam around everywhere and anywhere we want, even though nothing has changed since the lockdown when it comes to diseases. Anyways, diseases aside, before I get cancelled, I probably won't get cancelled. There's nothing to cancel me for. I didn't say anything. So as we kind of aced it out from the pandemic, I worked for the hotel for maybe like a month or so, but then eventually I applied for a job at a hospital. I got it, and it was a night job, probably the most hated. Well, it wasn't the most hated job, because I hated what I was doing, or like the times that I was doing it, but also it allowed me to get to where I am. That was like the final stage of getting to where I am right now. And I still have some goals to sort of reach, and everyone should always have goals to reach higher and higher and higher. But it got me to where I am at this moment. So with this hospital job, what I ended up doing was I was working nights. I was working 12 hours for 3 nights a week. I was working Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And then from Thursday morning, I used to come back home, I used to sleep for a few hours, and then from there I was just solely working on my own business. So I was working on my client jobs. The first day I tried not to accepting any shoots on the Thursday because I was absolutely knackered, but it was the day where I was generating leads, the day where I was kind of looking out for different jobs, see what I can do in order to increase the amount of clients I could get. And then I was reaching out to different businesses, people, individuals. Sometimes people need wedding photography, etc. Like even like the small jobs. So that's how I kind of like started scaling things up. And then over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then even Monday, I was doing like all the shooting. Sometimes it was like doing editing as well throughout those days, kind of barely sleeping. Like I was running on a tiny bit of sleep. Probably that's why I probably look like 32, because everyone always thinks I'm like 32, even though I'm in my mid-20s. So I did that for about less than a year, and I ended up scaling up in a way where I did some amazing work. I did some short films. I worked on some commercials in the sense of like just being an editor, or I got to meet a Hollywood director called Steve McQueen. He was doing like a film series thing for Channel 4. I believe it was called Small Acts. I got to join in for a day where I wasn't really doing much. I was more like I guess like a runner assistant, just there. And I got to meet an amazing guy, and I asked him a few tips on what should I do, and was university worth going to. And he said, well, if you've already done it, you've probably learned some skills, some valuable skills that you can apply. But if you came to me a little bit earlier, I would have probably said, don't go to university, just start creating, and eventually you get so good that people want to hire you. And actually there was a thing that was said, or that I seen on the internet, I want to say it was Gordon Ramsay that said it, but I might be wrong. If you want to succeed in something, or you want to be successful but you don't want to hate your life, so you're not working like a 9-to-5 job, then find something that you wouldn't mind doing for free for people, get really, really good at it, and then eventually you'll get so good at it that people will come up to you and be like, hey, how much do you charge? And then once you get to that point where people are asking you, how much do you charge for this piece of work? That's when you start charging, and that's how you start your business. And that's how you sort of create a good reputation about yourself, because you're creating amazing work, but you're also making income, and you're doing something that you love. So even though it gets difficult, because things do get difficult, I find content creation sometimes extremely difficult with some of the projects I work on, but because I love what I do, I generally do not mind that it gets difficult and extremely stressful because of, let's say, timelines or specific budget restraints. I ended up quitting the hospital job because it was just too much work for me, and I really just wanted to focus on the goals that I set myself. While I was chasing those goals, I ended up creating this upward spirals, and upward spirals are really, really true, because you know how you can get a downward spiral, you know, your girlfriend dumped you, you lost your job, you're homeless, etc. There are upward spirals. So if you work really, really hard, and you're consistent with it, and you keep on working, the people who really put in the effort and the work into whatever they're trying to achieve, there is a high possibility of just getting lucky and just getting to where you want it to be. And that's what I did. I just carried on creating content for free for myself, content for free for some of my clients, paid content for some of my clients. And I was so full of jobs where I started sort of declining the free work and sort of accepting the paid work on a more regular basis. And I started working with a few local companies. They, for example, hired me for, let's say, 6 months or 3 months here, 6 months there. And eventually those turn into long-lasting relationships where I'm still creating content for them. And I absolutely love it, and I absolutely love the people. And I'm absolutely grateful for everybody that I've met so far, everyone I get to work with, and everything that I get to do, because I get to do something I love. I get to pay my bills. I get to make decent income. You know, I'm no millionaire, by the way. I just wanted to say that as a disclaimer. I'm no millionaire, but I get to make a decent income, and I also get to enjoy my life. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for watching. If you did, please make sure to leave a like. If you really loved it, then make sure to subscribe. I did not use my big microphone from the top because I thought, hey, it would be pretty cool just to, have a microphone here. It was just an easier way to make it more chill, where I'm just sitting and talking to you guys rather than having like this whole full setup of microphones, even though I do have a whole full setup of lighting and camera and everything. It's just the microphone that's different, but it feels a little bit more chill. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. Take care, everybody, and bye bye.